It wasn't a fight. No shouting, no slamming doors, just silence. My dad looked at me across the kitchen table, eyes tired, voice flat. "You don't need this house, Ethan. Josh has a family, you don't." That was it. No conversation, no compromise. "My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 35. I paid every dollar for this house, signed every paper, fixed every pipe, and now I was being told I didn't deserve it because I didn't have a wife or kids or a life that looked like theirs. I thought family meant protection. Turns out it meant conditions." I still remember the chill in the air that morning, not from the wind, but from the silence inside my own house. My name is Ethan Carter. I am 35 years old, a financial analyst living in the quiet suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Or I used to live there until my parents told me I didn't belong in the very house I helped build. It had started subtly. My younger brother Josh had moved in temporarily with his wife Megan and their 2 kids after his company laid off half its staff. I didn't think much of it. He needed help and I had space. The house was large, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and I lived alone. What kind of brother would I be if I said no? Josh took the upstairs bedrooms. Megan stayed home with the kids while he looked for work. The kids were loud, but I chalked it up to the chaos of family life. I figured it was temporary. But weeks turned to months and something started to shift. My parents came by more often. They brought groceries, cooked meals, played with the grandkids. It stopped being my house and slowly became the family house. My space, my solitude felt like it was fading with every visit. Then one Sunday afternoon, my mother asked me to come into the living room. Josh and Megan sat on the couch with my parents, all looking too serious. I sat in the armchair, the one I bought myself when I got promoted 3 years ago. My father cleared his throat and said they had been discussing something important. He said Josh needed stability for the kids, that he couldn't keep moving them around, that it made more sense for them to live in the house permanently. I blinked. "What are you saying, Dad?" He looked at me unblinking. "We think it would be best if you moved out." My heart dropped. My mother spoke next, her tone too soft to be comforting. "You don't have any children, Ethan. You live alone and your job lets you work from anywhere. This house, it could really be a home for them." I stared at them. I thought it was a bad joke, but no one was smiling. Josh looked down at his hands. Megan avoided eye contact. "This is my house," I said. "I pay the mortgage, I paid the down payment. I have the deed." My dad shifted. "About that. Remember the documents we asked you to sign last year? You gave us power of attorney so we could help handle some of the paperwork while you were overseas." I froze. "You used that to transfer the deed." His eyes didn't move. "We didn't want to burden you with all the logistics. It was easier this way. Josh can take over the mortgage now. It's better for the family." I couldn't breathe. My mouth went dry. I looked at Josh, who still refused to meet my eyes. I had signed those documents because I trusted my parents. They said they'd help manage some refinancing while I was abroad. I had no idea they were planning this. "You betrayed me," I whispered. My mom stood up, walked over, tried to place her hand on my shoulder. "Ethan, honey, it's not betrayal. It's about doing what's best for everyone. Best for everyone but me," I said and stood up. The silence in the room pressed on me like a weight. I walked out, left the house, and sat in my car. My hands trembled, my mind raced. A few hours later, Josh came out alone. He knocked on my window. I rolled it down just enough to hear him. "I didn't ask them to do this," he said. "But you didn't stop them either," I replied. He sighed. "I just wanted what's best for my kids." I shook my head. I started the engine. I needed airspace, anything but that house. The next day I started packing. I packed everything slowly, carefully, more out of disbelief than purpose. Every object I touched carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. The coffee maker my parents gave me when I bought the house. The framed picture of Josh and me at the beach long before either of us understood the word resentment. I couldn't even bring myself to pack that photo. I left it on the kitchen counter face down. The house felt like a stranger. The echo of footsteps upstairs, kids shouting about cereal, Megan's laugh, all of it reminded me I didn't belong here anymore. One morning I came into the kitchen to find a note on the fridge. Megan had planned a birthday party for their daughter. In my house. I wasn't invited. I asked Josh about it later. He shrugged and said they figured I'd be busy. Busy getting erased, maybe. That night I went down to the basement. My new room. A storage space with barely enough room for a mattress, a desk, and the boxes I hadn't unpacked from when I came back from that overseas project. My name was still on the Wi-Fi account, on the water bill, on the trash service. But it didn't matter. The next week I sat down with my laptop and pulled up the original mortgage documents. I remembered every cent I had scraped together to make the down payment, $180,000. I had maxed out my Roth IRA early, withdrawn from savings, sold off stocks too soon. My parents said they would contribute monthly like rent. They did for a while. Then came excuses, then silence. Out of curiosity, I pulled the county records. I wanted to see the exact date the title transfer was filed. Maybe it was after our big talk. Maybe it was done out of desperation. But it wasn't. The title had been changed 6 months earlier, before Josh even moved in, before they asked me to sign anything. They planned it. I sat back in my chair staring at the screen. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't about helping Josh through a hard time. They had intended this from the start. My parents, the people I trusted most, made a decision about my life and my property without me. I had been a placeholder, a bridge, a fool. I closed the laptop and stared into the dark of the basement. I couldn't live like this. Not under this roof, not in the walls I paid for, surrounded by people who acted like I was the guest. I opened a new browser tab and searched for short-term rentals in Beaverton. Everything I looked at felt temporary, overpriced, sterile. But it didn't matter. I just needed somewhere else. I needed anywhere but here. My gut twisted at the idea of packing up my life into a few suitcases, walking away from a place I once thought would be mine forever. Dinner that evening was a quiet, strange affair. They ate upstairs. I ate alone in the basement, chewing without tasting. Afterward, I came up to wash my dishes and was met by my father in the garage. His arms were crossed. "We need to talk," he said. "Josh has a family. He needs this house. So because I don't have kids, I lose everything. Ethan, you'll land on your feet. You always do. You don't need this space like they do. You have no dependents. No roots, no rights," I said bitterly. He didn't argue. He just turned and walked away. Later I called Claire. My voice shook, but I told her everything. The betrayal, the basement, the plan to move. There was a long pause on the other end. "Ethan, I care about you. I really do, but this situation, it's not stable. And I'm looking for something secure, a future, a man who knows where he's going. I know where I'm going, just not where I'll live next week." She sighed. "Maybe we need some space." That was the last real conversation we had. 2 mornings later, my mom left an envelope on my pillow. Inside was a formal typed letter. They expected me to move out within 10 days. It was signed by both of them. "For your own good," her note said in cursive. I didn't cry right away. I sat on the bed staring at the paper. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on top of the box labeled Essentials. And then I kept packing. This time I didn't fold the clothes carefully. I didn't wrap the dishes, I just tossed everything in. Because now it really was no longer my home. I slept in my car that night, not because I didn't have a roof over my head, but because the one I did have felt like a lie. I parked a few blocks away in a quiet neighborhood near Beaverton and reclined the seat. I stared at the ceiling of my car, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The leather was stiff and my back ached, but I couldn't make myself go back inside. In the morning, I drove to a small coffee shop I used to like. I needed Wi-Fi and caffeine. I set up at a corner table and started digging deeper into the paperwork I had scanned before I left the basement. My laptop was filled with old PDFs, digital statements, and contracts I hadn't opened since I signed them. The title transfer was real, legal. Filed months ago under my name through the power of attorney I had given my parents the previous year. I had signed that paper during my business trip to Tokyo when Dad said it was just to help refinance the mortgage while I was abroad. I didn't read the fine print. I trusted him. A part of me hoped it had been a clerical error or something I could fight, so I contacted a real estate attorney, someone named Rachel Murphy, recommended by a former colleague. We set up a consultation call. I explained everything: the house, the signatures, the transfer, the betrayal. Rachel asked me to email over the documents. I did, hands trembling as I clicked send. She called back an hour later. "It's airtight, Ethan. The power of attorney form you signed granted them full authority. And the title transfer was completed and notarized properly. Legally, the house belongs to your brother now." My mouth went dry. "So there's nothing I can do. You could sue, but unless you can prove coercion or fraud, it would be hard to win, and even then the costs would be significant. You'd likely lose more than you'd gain." I thanked her and hung up. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. I left the shop and sat in my car again, staring out at nothing. How had I been so naive? I worked in finance. I was supposed to understand contracts, obligations, liabilities. But I let my guard down because it was family. And now I was a guest in my own past. Later that evening, Claire called. I didn't answer. She texted instead. "We need to talk." I called her back. Her voice was quiet, unsure. "I've been thinking," she said, "about everything, about us." I waited. "I just don't understand how you let this happen. How could you give someone else control over your house, over your life?" I was trying to help. I thought it was temporary, but it wasn't. "And now you're floating. No plan, no place. That scares me, Ethan. So this is it. I think we need to take a break. Maybe a long one." She hung up before I could respond. I stayed in my car again that night. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because nowhere felt right. I didn't want to go back to that basement. And I couldn't bear the idea of checking into a motel with paper-thin walls and fluorescent lights. So I drove to a Walmart parking lot and slept there. In the morning, I showered at the gym. The receptionist didn't ask questions. I pretended everything was fine. Afterward, I drove to the county clerk's office. I needed to see the papers for myself. Holding them, not just seeing pixels on a screen. The woman behind the counter printed them for me. I paid the fee and stepped outside. There it was, my name on the original deed. And then 6 months later, the name scratched out and replaced with Tyler Carter. Not a correction, a replacement. I remembered that day vividly now. My dad had asked me to sign a few things before my flight. He said it would help him manage the refinancing process. I was in a rush. I signed and left. That single signature cost me everything. I folded the documents carefully and slid them into my briefcase. I walked across the street to a park and sat on a bench. The wind was sharp, the sky gray. I was 35. No home, no partner, no plan. And worst of all, I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I the gullible son who trusted too easily, the responsible brother who helped family in need, or just the fool who handed over $1 million asset because someone asked nicely? I closed my eyes and leaned back. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Remember, we did this for the family. I turned the phone face down on my lap and let the silence return. Everything felt quiet. Too quiet. I wasn't okay, but I wasn't broken either. Not yet. I wasn't sure how much more I could take, but the universe apparently had more in store. That week, I received a call from my manager at Colton Financial Group. The tone in his voice was different, stiff, formal. He said there had been concerns raised by a client who had heard a rumor that I was being sued by my own family over property disputes. I tried to laugh it off, told him there was no lawsuit, just personal family issues. He didn't sound convinced. Unfortunately, Ethan, perception matters, especially in finance. The partners think it's best we pause your client-facing role until everything is sorted out. Pause, I asked. He hesitated. Effective immediately. That call ended 3 years of steady employment. No misconduct, no warning. Just the ripple effect of Tyler running his mouth, making himself look like a hero who had to rescue his parents from a selfish, childless older brother. I moved out of the car and into a tiny apartment in an aging brick building on the outskirts of Hillsborough. It smelled like dust and old linoleum, but it had a bed, a window, and a lock. That made it better than the back seat of my sedan. I spent the next few days job hunting, editing my resume, trying to piece together a story that didn't sound like a complete disaster. Nothing stuck. I couldn't focus, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's face as he handed me that power of attorney. Calm, confident, sure I wouldn't look deeper. Late one night, while aimlessly checking old emails, a new message came in from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple, from someone who cares. I opened it. Hello, Ethan. My name is George Monroe. I believe I am your grandfather, your mother's father. I live in Seattle. I know this may be confusing, but I've been trying to find you for some time. I would like to meet you if you're open to it. Attached was a photo of an elderly man standing in front of a blue clapboard house holding a cane, smiling softly. He looked kind, familiar almost, but it couldn't be. My mother told me both her parents died in a car accident before I was born. She had told me that story dozens of times. A rainy night, a semi-truck, a bridge near Spokane. I sat frozen at my desk rereading the message. Then I looked again at the name, George Monroe. It rang a bell. I dug through a drawer and pulled out an old box of photos. Family shots, holidays, birthdays. One of them from my third Christmas showed an older man in the corner of the frame, half out of view, standing near the fireplace. Written on the back, George M. I didn't sleep that night. I wrote back around 3 a.m. If this is real and you really are who you say you are, I want to meet. I need to know the truth. He replied by morning, Saturday, noon, 48th and Pine, Seattle. I'll be waiting. I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys, and drove north. The freeway was quiet that morning. Every mile between Portland and Seattle gave me more room to think and more questions to chase. Why would Mom lie? What else had she hidden? Who was George Monroe and why now? As I crossed into Washington and the skyline of Seattle came into view, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. A flicker of it, small but real. The neighborhood near 48th and Pine was quiet, the kind of place where the trees were older than the houses and every porch had a story. I parked across the street and walked slowly toward the blue house from the photo. It looked exactly the same. Trimmed hedges, wooden steps, an old wind chime that danced with every breeze. George was waiting on the porch. He stood slowly, cane in one hand, the other extended with a hesitant smile. His gray hair was thinner than in the photo, but his eyes were sharp. Searching. "Ethan," he said, "you look just like your mother when she was young." I shook his hand, unsure whether to smile or cry. "I thought you were dead." His expression dimmed. "I know. That story wasn't my idea." He led me inside. The living room smelled like cedar and old books. A woman sat on the floral couch, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She stood and smiled warmly. "This is Evelyn," George said. "My wife, your grandmother." I stared. "Evelyn? But Mom always said that we died in a car accident," she finished gently. "I know, and I'm sorry you were told that." We sat down. They offered tea, but I just wanted answers. Why did she cut you off?" George sighed, leaning heavily on the cane even while sitting. "It was about money. Years ago, before you were born, your father invested in a family property deal I warned him against. It went south. He lost a lot, blamed me, said I embarrassed him in front of your mom. And that was it." "He took her away," Evelyn said. "We tried reaching out, sending letters, even driving down once. But your father told us never to come back. And she chose him." The room was quiet. I let the weight of it settle. "I spent my whole life thinking you were gone." George nodded. "I spent mine wondering if you'd ever find out the truth." We talked for hours. They asked about my life and I told them everything. Not just the house, but the betrayal, the job, the basement, the feeling of being disposable. George leaned forward, his voice steady. "You understand finance, don't you? Numbers systems?" I nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time you start again, from what you know. Not from what they told you." Evelyn added, "You were always meant for more than living by someone else's plan. Start from where you're strongest. Numbers, not emotions." George stood and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out a leather-bound folder and handed it to me. Inside were printouts of financial statements, charts, company breakdowns. "I used to be an investment advisor," he said. "Retired now, but I never stopped studying. Maybe it's time we brush off the dust." I blinked at the pages. They felt familiar, safe, understandable. "Would you teach me?" He smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." For the next week, I stayed with them in the guest room. Every morning, we reviewed case studies. Every afternoon, we analyzed current trends, evaluated risk profiles, debated investment strategies. George was sharp, patient, methodical. Evelyn made meals, brought in books, asked about my dreams beyond numbers. I hadn't dreamed in a while. One evening, Evelyn handed me a sheet of paper. At the top was a simple phrase, "Build something that no one can take from you." It hit me harder than I expected. My life had been built on borrowed trust. Now I needed something real. That night, I drafted the first outline of a project. An idea, something I could own, and for the first time in months I fell asleep not thinking of what I lost, but of what I could build. The next morning I woke up before the sun brewed a pot of strong coffee and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. George was already there, flipping through the Wall Street Journal with a magnifying glass. Evelyn hummed softly as she chopped apples for oatmeal. I pulled up a spreadsheet I'd started the night before, listing out possible ideas for small-scale investments. I couldn't go back to corporate finance, not yet. But maybe I didn't need to. Maybe I could build something new from scratch. With George's help, I started small. A few $100s into a diversified ETF, then a peer-to-peer lending platform, a handful of municipal bonds. Each decision we dissected together. Risk, yield, liquidity. He turned every trade into a lesson. Meanwhile, I picked up freelance work, financial consulting gigs through online platforms helping small business owners get their books in order or forecast their cash flows. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep me afloat and gave me a sense of purpose. Evelyn encouraged me to start writing about everything I was learning, everything I'd gone through. She said people might relate. I was skeptical at first, but eventually I launched a blog and called it Second Ledger. My first post was raw. I detailed the betrayal, the paperwork I hadn't read, the house I'd paid for but lost. I didn't hold back. I didn't hide names. It went semi-viral. People messaged me. Strangers from across the country, sons who'd lost inheritance to manipulative siblings, women pushed out of family homes after divorce, veterans swindled by children they trusted. They thanked me for telling the story they didn't have words for. A month later, I got an email from a startup founder named Jonah Wells. He ran a small fintech company focused on ethical lending and financial education. He'd read my blog and wanted to meet. We had coffee at a downtown Seattle cafe, and after 2 hours of nonstop ideas, he offered me a role as a part-time financial advisor. Flexible, remote, mission-driven. I said yes. My life wasn't glamorous. I still lived in the guest room, still drove the same car with the broken rear-view mirror. But I had momentum again. I had clarity. One evening, while researching housing markets for a blog post, I stumbled onto a listing that made my stomach twist. It was my old house. Same address, same pictures, same gray shutters and red door I had painted myself. Listed on Airbnb as perfect family house, sleeps 8, pet friendly, great for holidays. I clicked through the photos. My bedroom had been converted into a nursery. The basement still had my bookshelf, but the books were gone. The garage door still stuck halfway open. The listing used language that made it sound like a legacy home passed down through generations. It even mentioned the original owner by name. My name. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I had never authorized them to use my identity, my story, or photos I had taken. It was a violation. Another line crossed. I took screenshots and filed a report with Airbnb for identity misuse. Then I emailed their support with documentation, the title deed history, the original photos, the blog post. I didn't know if they would take it down, but I had to try. I had to reclaim something, even if it was just my name. George sat beside me, reading the listing over my shoulder. His face hardened. They don't stop, do they? No, I said, but neither do I. He nodded. Then we keep building, and we did. 2 weeks later, George collapsed in the garden. It was sudden, no warning. 1 minute he was trimming the hydrangeas, the next he was on the ground. Evelyn screamed for me. I ran out, heart pounding, knees buckling. At the hospital, the doctors said it was a stroke. They did what they could, but he never regained consciousness. He passed away the following morning. I held Evelyn's hand as the machine stopped beeping. Her grip didn't loosen, not once. We buried him in a quiet cemetery overlooking Puget Sound. The wind was sharp, the sky silver gray. Evelyn wore George's favorite scarf. I stood next to her, numb, the letter he'd left for me tucked into my jacket pocket. The will was clear. George had left everything to Evelyn with instructions that if she passed before him, the estate would go to me. But Evelyn, with glassy eyes and a soft voice, told me she'd spoken to the lawyer and decided to transfer everything to me now. She said George would have wanted that. She handed me the envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. Ethan, build it well. Build it so no one can take it. Love, George. That night I sat alone on the back porch. I read the letter over and over. Then I went inside and started sorting through George's files, organizing what he left behind. Portfolios, land deeds, notes on charities he supported, a small folder labeled, "For Ethan Only." Inside were blueprints, business plans, a name scratched out in pencil, Willow House. The next morning I got a call from my mother. "Ethan," she said, "I heard about George. I'm sorry to hear that." "Thanks," I said, my voice flat. There was a pause, then her tone shifted. "Now that you've inherited, I think it's only fair to talk about how this can be shared. Tyler's going through a lot. The kids need stability." I stared at the phone, stunned. "Are you serious, Ethan?" She sighed. "You don't have a family, not like he does. Tyler's carrying the weight of 3 lives. You don't need all of it." I felt a fire rise in my chest. "You already stole 1 house from me, Mom. You're not getting another. This isn't about houses, it's about family." "Exactly. And maybe if you'd treated me like family instead of a bank, we wouldn't be here." Her voice sharpened. "If you don't share, you'll leave us no choice. We'll have to get lawyers involved. Tyler has rights." I laughed without humor. "Good, so do I. And this time I have documentation. I have an estate lawyer. I have George's will notarized and bulletproof. You want to fight this? Bring it." Her breath caught, then silence. "You'll regret this, Ethan. We're your blood." I hung up. I sat still for a long moment, then I stood, walked to George's study and took out the Willow House file. Let them sue. Let them drag it into court. I was done playing defense. I wasn't that boy in the basement anymore. I had resolve now, and a plan, and I was going to build something they couldn't touch. Madison picked up on the second ring. I hadn't spoken to her in nearly a decade, but hearing her voice made something in my chest loosen. We'd been close once before life got complicated. Now she was a partner at a reputable Portland law firm known for her aggressive litigation tactics in estate disputes. "Ethan," she said, confused at first. "Wow, it's been years. Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I need your help." We met the next morning in a coffee shop near her office. I brought a manila folder thick with documents. George's will, property records, emails, the original mortgage forms, and the transfer documents. Madison listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowed. "You didn't have legal representation when you signed this, no. Just my dad and some notary he brought along. He said it was temporary, for refinancing." She tapped her pen against her notebook. "That's coercion. And if we can prove misrepresentation, we can move to have the transfer nullified. We'll also include financial damages and pursue discovery into your father's finances." We filed within a week. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Undue influence. The court assigned a date 6 weeks out. My stomach twisted every time I thought about it, but Madison kept me focused. She was a machine, organized, relentless, and clear about what we needed. The pre-trial discovery process was brutal. Depositions, document requests, old emails resurrected from forgotten accounts. I found a chain where Dad explicitly told someone in a group chat that the house would be his son Tyler's soon enough. That was dated before I even signed the transfer. When the day of the hearing arrived, the courtroom was packed. My parents sat stiffly with their attorney. Tyler was there too, fidgeting in his seat, eyes darting. Evelyn sat behind me, hands folded tightly in her lap. Madison called me to the stand first. I spoke clearly. I told the judge everything, how I had paid for the down payment. how the mortgage had been in my name, how I'd signed away ownership under emotional pressure, with no legal support or independent advice. Madison introduced evidence like a conductor leading an orchestra, mortgage statements, text messages, emails. One particularly damning email from my father to Tyler read, "It's almost done. Ethan won't even notice." Their defense attorney tried to argue family trust, that the transfer was out of love and necessity. He kept repeating that Tyler had children, that I was a bachelor with less urgent needs. The judge wasn't impressed. "Is there any evidence Ethan was compensated for the property?" "No, Your Honor." "Did he sign with independent legal counsel?" "No, Your Honor." "Do you have any documentation indicating Ethan understood the nature and permanence of the transfer?" "No, Your Honor." In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The property transfer was voided due to lack of informed consent and coercion. I was awarded $300,000, the amount I had put into the home, plus additional damages. More importantly, the judge ordered a financial audit of my father's estate. Within weeks, investigators uncovered years of tax evasion and hidden assets. It didn't just embarrass my parents, it exposed a pattern of manipulation and abuse that spanned decades. The media caught wind of it. A few headlines ran stories like "Family Fortune Unraveled in Courtroom Drama." Reporters waited outside the courthouse for a comment. I gave none. I walked past them down the steps, the wind sharp against my face. Evelyn met me at the curb holding George's old coat. I slipped it on. That night I sat by the fire in the study. The Willow House folder was on my lap. We weren't done yet, not even close. Madison and I spent the next few weeks gathering every remaining piece of documentation. The fallout from the court ruling had begun to ripple outward, and I had no intention of letting it die quietly. I'd already gotten my justice in the courtroom. Now it was time to uncover everything that had been hidden beneath the surface. News of the judgment had reached the startup community quickly. A few old colleagues called to congratulate me. Others offered cautious support, unsure whether aligning with me would draw my family's ire. I didn't care. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was looking for accountability. The first tip came from an old friend who worked in compliance at a Portland-based lender. He called me late one night. "Ethan," he said, "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I ran a check after seeing your name pop up in our flagged applications. Someone tried to open a business credit line under your name 2 years ago. The system rejected it, but it raised a red flag." "What kind of business?" I asked. "A media consultancy, registered to an address in Bend. Sound familiar?" My pulse quickened. That was Tyler's in-laws' place. I dove into my credit reports, pulling records from all 3 major bureaus. Within hours, I found 2 credit cards opened in my name in 2020, each with high limits, low activity, and bills forwarded to a P.O. box in Eugene. I called Madison. "This changes things," she said. "This isn't just family fraud anymore. This is identity theft." We contacted the Federal Trade Commission, filed formal complaints, and initiated investigations with the credit bureaus. Within days, I was on the phone with federal agents, providing copies of old emails and account statements. They confirmed the cards had been used to fund an early-phase marketing campaign for a startup called Gen Trust Tyler's. Meanwhile, Tyler's world was crumbling. His wife, Andrea, had filed for divorce a month after the court ruling. She cited financial instability and irreconcilable deceit. She moved back to Ohio with the kids, leaving Tyler in a rented townhouse in the outskirts of Portland. I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling to keep the company afloat. But I stayed quiet. No interviews, no press statements. I didn't even post on the blog. I let the truth work its way through the system piece by piece. In mid-October, federal agents executed a search warrant on Gen Trust's offices. Tyler was arrested for financial fraud and identity theft. News broke the following morning. This time the headlines used his name, not mine. Former tech CEO faces charges in family fraud scheme. Public reaction was swift. Investors pulled out. Partners terminated contracts. Tyler's name became radioactive in the industry. My phone rang non-stop that day, but I only took one call from Madison. "Congratulations," she said simply. "You did it." It didn't feel like victory, not exactly, but it felt like closure. That evening, I walked through the Willow House project site. Construction was ahead of schedule. The community center was taking shape: modular classrooms, therapy rooms, and a green courtyard with fruit trees. Evelyn had helped design the library corner. Her initials were carved into the foundation stone beside George's. I paused near the framing of what would be the main entrance. The autumn wind stirred sawdust at my feet. I could still hear George's voice in my head. "Build it so no one can take it." He was right. They had taken from me home, trust, even my name. But I had taken it all back, and this time I wasn't letting go. 3 months later, I sold everything. The townhouse, the remaining stocks, even the Mustang George and I had restored together. Evelyn and I packed up what we needed, donated the rest, and left Oregon behind. We moved to a lakeside cottage in Bellagio, a small village hugging the edge of Lake Como. The air smelled of lemon trees and wood smoke. Evelyn took up gardening again. I spent my mornings hiking and my afternoons sketching out plans for a new center. One built not just with money, but with purpose. I called it Second Start. It wasn't just a center. It was a safe space for men like me. Men who'd been cut out, pushed down, written off by the people they loved most. The ones who had their names stolen, their finances drained, their trust betrayed by family. I knew their pain. I lived it. And now I was going to help them rise. We started small financial literacy workshops, identity theft recovery resources, legal aid connections. I hosted evening sessions on rebuilding credit, and Evelyn led quiet groups in the garden. We created a network, a voice. One morning, a journalist from a Milan-based magazine asked for an interview. She had read the blog post I published announcing Second Start, and it had gone viral. I declined the interview, but gave her a short statement. "We're not victims. We're architects of our own rebuilding." Within weeks, the story spread across Europe and then back to the States. NPR ran a feature titled "The Man Who Rebuilt Family Justice." Donations followed. So did letters from men across the country, each carrying a story that felt hauntingly familiar. Then one evening, as I was reviewing a batch of scholarship applications, an email came through. The sender's name stopped me. Claire. The message was short. "Ethan, I saw the NPR piece. I'm proud of what you've built. I regret walking away when I did. I wish I had stayed." I didn't see it clearly then, but you were always the stronger one. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choice, and I had found my peace without her. That night, Evelyn and I walked down to the lake. The water shimmered in the moonlight. She looped her arm through mine and whispered, "George would be proud of you." I squeezed her hand. So would Mom someday. Maybe. But I didn't need their pride. I had built something better than validation. I had built freedom, and I wasn't done building yet. So I started writing again, not for a blog or an audience, but for myself, a daily ritual. Every morning after my walk, I'd sit on the back patio and put pen to paper. Pages filled with thoughts I never dared say aloud, letters to my younger self, reflections on forgiveness, on legacy, on what it meant to start over. Eventually, I drafted one last letter. This one was different. "Dear Mom and Dad, this isn't a letter seeking closure. I no longer need that from you. It's not about blame or resentment. It's a declaration. I am no longer the son defined by what he lacks. Not the quiet one, the accommodating one, the disposable one. You chose Tyler, again and again in ways big and small. You celebrated his choices, excused his mistakes, and handed him the foundation I helped build. But I found something you couldn't give me, myself. I won't be part of your narrative anymore. I won't play the role of the invisible one. I wish you well from a distance you no longer get to cross, Ethan. I sealed it. I didn't send it. I burned it in the fireplace that night, watching the smoke curl into the stars above Lake Como. Weeks passed. Evelyn's garden bloomed with late summer color. We hosted a community dinner for the men in the program and their families. Children laughed under string lights. Old wounds felt for one night less sharp. Then during a radio segment, the host called me a symbol of resilience. I smiled politely. I didn't feel like a symbol, just a man who'd been pushed too far and decided to stand back up. Claire wrote again. I deleted it without opening. I kept walking, building, living. One crisp fall morning, I watched fog rise from the lake and thought of Tyler. I hadn't heard from him since the investigation ended. I didn't need to. Some ghosts weren't meant to be welcomed back. That night I posted a final message on Second Start's site. To the ones who've been told you're not enough because you didn't follow the script, this is for you. If you've been cast aside for not having kids, for not being married, for choosing a life outside their expectations, know this. Their measure is not your worth. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not alone. You are your own beginning. And if no one's told you yet, let me be the first. You matter. Peace doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from choosing yourself. That night, Evelyn and I toasted with her homemade lemon liqueur. We sat by the fire listening to the hum of the lake. She said, "You're not the man they wanted you to be. You're better. You're the man you were meant to become." I held her hand, and I knew I might not have children or a traditional family or anyone to carry my name, but I had something more enduring, a life fully mine. If you've ever been judged by what you don't have, children, marriage, a white picket fence, maybe it's time to ask what you do have. If you have yourself, then maybe, just maybe, you already have everything you need.